Extreme close-up of a digital watch face clicking to 1540. Low-frequency hum of helicopter rotors begins to swell. The mission was supposed to take 60 minutes, but in exactly 14 minutes, everything goes wrong. Aerial view of the fleet of 16 helicopters crossing the coastline. Heavy rotor wash. Irene. 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 Irene crackles. Over the radio. Imagine you're in the door, feeling the 100-knot wind against your face. Inside the cockpit of Super 6-1. The pilot's hands are steady on the stick. He pulls back on the stick to bring the massive bird into a hover. This is a precision hover over a narrow urban canyon. Rangers fast-roping into the brown dust of the city. The rhythmic thwip-thwip of heavy nylon ropes. That's 12 men down the first rope. 40 more to go to secure the perimeter. A Delta Force operator scans the horizon with a shimmering heat haze. The secure perimeter remains the focus as the ground team enters. Every 90 seconds, the density of the surrounding crowd increases. Close-up of an AK-47 muzzle flash from a window. Sharp, metallic clack-clack of gunfire echoing off stone walls. This is where the tactical reality of urban warfare becomes a nightmare. Archive footage of the dusty war-torn streets of Mogadishu. Grainy video of Somali militia running toward the sound of rotors. The mission is 7 minutes in. The clock is ticking toward disaster. A Black Hawk door gunner firing the M134 minigun. A continuous, terrifying roar like a chainsaw. That's 2 belts of ammo gone. 8 more in the ready box. An RPG-7 rocket being stabilized on a Somali insurgent's shoulder. The hollow whoosh of a rocket launch toward the tail rotor. Wait until you see what happens when the tail rotor fails. The screen flashes white, then cuts to a spinning POV of the city. But here, that's what nobody knew at the time. The invincible Black Hawk had just been proven vulnerable. The next 90 scenes document the longest night in U.S. Special Operations history. Super 6-1 lies crumpled in an alleyway. Smoke rising, the haunting sound of a dying turbine engine fills the air. That's 1 bird down. The rescue clock starts now. Ground teams sprinting through narrow alleys. Toward the smoke, heavy breathing, boots pounding on loose rubble in the 90-degree heat. He slams a fresh mag into his carbine and pushes forward. Super 6-4, piloted by Mike Duran, circling the first crash site. Radio chatter confirms they are taking over overhead cover. The pilot pulls the bird into a tight orbit to keep eyes on survivors. A Somali militia leader signaling with a handheld radio. The militia begins to ignore the Rangers and targets the birds directly. The militia had been training for this exact tail rotor shot. A second RPG streaks upward from a hidden rooftop position, a high-pitched zing, followed by a metal-on-metal explosion. It has been exactly 80 minutes since the mission started. Super 6-4 spinning violently over a residential area. The low rotor warning horn blares as Mike Durant fights the controls. Without a tail rotor, torque makes the fuselage spin uncontrollably. The second crash site, miles away from the first. A distant, dull thud of the second impact echoes through the city. The force is now split between 2 different locations. The plan is shattered. Delta snipers, Randy Shughart and Gary Gordon looking down from Super 6-2. They see the mob closing in on the second crash site below. Notice what happens next. They ask for permission to go down. Shughart and Gordon fast-roping into the chaos of the second site. Intense, lonely gunfire from their sniper rifles against hundreds of militia. They know they are likely not coming back, but they descend anyway. A close-up of a single shell casing hitting the dirt. The next 60 seconds would change everything as the perimeter at the second site is overrun. The focus remains on the bravery of 2 men against an entire city. The Rangers at the first crash site setting up a defensive line. The rhythmic thud-thud of a .50 caliber machine gun holds the street. That's 5 hours in. 10 more to go until the sun comes up. A medic working on a wounded soldier under a flickering light. The tearing of medical tape and heavy, labored breathing in a dark room. Imagine the smell of blood and dust in an enclosed space. Pakistani and Malaysian tanks idling in the moonlight. At the UN base, the rescue requires heavy armor that the US didn't have on site. In 3 hours, this convoy will attempt to break the siege. A sniper on a rooftop checking his thermal optics for movement. The electronic hum of the night vision equipment alerts him to a target. Notice what happens next. The shadows begin to move in the alley. The lost convoy of trucks wandering the maze of Mogadishu streets. A map shows the wrong turns taken under heavy fire. Every turn is a gauntlet of fire from every darkened window. Mike Durant being taken captive by the militia after the site is overrun. The sound of a camera shutter captures the famous photo of the pilot. This image would eventually shock the entire American public. Night falls. Green tracer fire lights up the sky over the city. The pop of flares overhead in their long, whistling descent. Midnight. The Rangers have been fighting for 8 hours straight. A little bird AH-6 helicopter making a terrifying strafing run. The brood of the miniguns and the flash of rockets close to the ground. The pilots are flying nap of the earth, mere feet above the roofs. A soldier sharing his last canteen of water with a teammate. The soft clink of metal gear as they shift positions behind cover. Think about the absolute thirst after 10 hours in the sun and dust. A wide shot of the city at night. Sparks of gunfire everywhere. Wait until you see what happens next. The rescue convoy is finally in motion. The focus is now on the massive armored column pushing through. A Malaysian APC taking a direct RPG hit on the lead vehicle. A metallic clang and the hiss of fire extinguishers inside the hull. The armor holds, and the column continues to push toward the crash site. Rangers inside the crash site hearing the tanks in the distance. A faint, rhythmic clanking of tracks on pavement brings hope. Notice what happens next. The heaviest fighting of the night begins. A Delta operator using a laser designator on a rooftop. High-pitched signal tone as he paints a target for the birds. The air support prepares for a precision strike 50 meters away. The armor column finally breaks through to the crash site perimeter. The grinding of heavy engines and cheering from the exhausted Rangers. But the mission isn't over. They still have to recover the fallen. Soldiers using power saws to cut through the twisted Blackhawk wreckage. The screech of metal on metal and sparks flying in the dark. Leave no man behind is the core of the Ranger creed. A graphic showing the Mogadishu mile the route they must run. There isn't enough room in the APCs for every soldier to ride. Here's why this matters. Some will have to run out on foot. Exhausted Rangers running behind moving tanks for cover from snipers. Heavy, rhythmic breathing and the clack of gunfire follow them. That's 17 hours of combat. Their bodies are failing, but they run. The sun beginning to rise over the Indian Ocean in the east. The sound of ocean waves mixing with the final echoes of gunfire. Imagine you're seeing the sun after thinking you'd never see it again. The armored column entering the safety of the UN stadium gates. The sudden silence of the stadium compared to the noise of the city. That's 18 hours. The mission is technically over for the troops. A slow pan across the faces of the exhausted, bloodied Rangers. This is where it gets really interesting. The battle was over, but the political fallout was just beginning. The next 60 scenes explore the aftermath and legacy. Close-up of a Ranger loading his very last magazine. The sharp metallic click of the mag seating into the well. That's 28 rounds left. He has to make every single shot count. A little bird AH-6 pilot spotting movement in a narrow alleyway. The zip of 70mm rockets leaving the pods into the target. The pilot hovers at rooftop level to avoid the RPG threats below. General Garrison at the Tactical Operations Center watches the drone feed. Blueprints of the city are spread across a plywood table in the heat. The weight of command is visible on his grim, silent expression. A medic using a flashlight between his teeth to see a soldier's wound. The heavy, wet sound of a pressure dressing being applied to the limb. He checks the pulse. It's weak, but steady in the darkness. The Malaysian APCs pushing through a barricade of burning cars. Screeching metal and the roar of a diesel engine as they break through. Imagine you're inside that steel box, hearing bullets ping off the hull, A Somali gunman taking aim from a second-story balcony window. A sudden crack, and the shattering of glass near the ground team. Notice what happens next. This squad uses bounding overwatch to move. Super 628, dropping water and ammo crates into the courtyard. The heavy thump of the wooden crates hitting the dirt floor. In exactly 40 minutes, the final extraction attempt will begin. A young ranger looking at a photo of his family in his helmet liner. Wind whistling through the bullet holes in the concrete wall. Here's what nobody knew. His first child was born just yesterday. Graphics showing the deering of the defensive perimeter. Pulsing green circles represent the lines around the first crash site. That's 14 hours down. The sun is only 2 hours away. A high-altitude drone shot of the city, a sea of dark roofs. This is where it gets really interesting, because the militia is preparing one last push. The focus shifts to the final, desperate struggle of the night. Hundreds of militia members moving through shadows. Toward the site, distant chanting and the clatter of many feet on stone streets. Notice what happens next. The Rangers don't retreat. They begin. A Delta operator checking the battery on his PVS-7 night vision. The faint electronic squeal of the optics, powering up in the dark. Through the green lens, the world looks like a ghostly, neon forest. The UN convoy hitting a massive IED that stops the lead vehicle. A ground-shaking boom that rattles the camera and the troops. That's one tank disabled. The column must now push around it. A Ranger NCO shouting orders. Hold your fire until you have a target. The discipline required to survive a siege is the primary focus here. Even under intense fire, the years of training take over the mind. Close-up of the wreckage of Super 621's twisted tail rotor. The wind catching the metal, making it moan like a living thing. Wait until you see how they finally leave this hallowed site. A little bird pilot engaging a technical truck with a heavy gun. The rhythmic thump-thump of the 2.75-inch rockets hitting home. The truck disappears in a cloud of orange fire and black smoke. The sky turning a deep, bruised purple as dawn finally approaches. The first morning birds chirping, out of place in the active order. 5:15 a.m. The countdown to the final extraction is at 0. The first Malaysian tank rolling into the crash site plaza area. The screech of treads and the smell of heavy diesel exhaust. Rangers emerge from the buildings looking like ghosts covered in dust. Soldiers carrying the bodies of their fallen comrades to the APCs. Somber, heavy footsteps and the clanking of metal stretchers. They spent 15 hours in hell to bring these men home. The camera zooms into a single ranger's eyes, red and bloodshot. Here's why this matters today. The Mogadishu mile was about to begin. The focus shifts to the run for those who can't fit in the tanks. The APCs begin to pull away, but there is no room left inside. The roar of engines moving away. Dust filling the morning air. Notice what happens next. The runners use the tanks as moving shields. A soldier running while firing his weapon over his shoulder. The heavy pounding of boots on hot, debris-covered asphalt. Imagine running a mile in full gear while being shot at from windows. A ranger tripping on debris, but being hauled up by his teammate. A grunt of effort and the sound of heavy fabric tearing. That's 800 meters down. 800 more to go to reach the stadium. Archive footage of the UN Stadium, the designated safe zone. High-angle shot of the white stadium walls in the morning sunlight. 6:30 a.m. The runners are finally nearing the stadium gates. A bullet striking the pavement inches from a ranger's running foot. The ping of metal on stone and the whistle of the ricochet. Here's what nobody knew. The militia had one last ambush waiting. A little bird making its final strafing run to clear the entrance. The breath of the miniguns for the very last time today. That's 2,000 rounds of 7.62 spent in the last 10 minutes. The first ranger crossing the threshold into the stadium safety. The sound of his heavy breathing echoing in the concrete tunnel. He collapses against a wall. His face a mask of sweat and gunpowder. Medics at the stadium rushing to meet the incoming armored vehicles. Shouts of medic. And over here, in multiple different languages. Pakistani and Malaysian doctors work side by side to save Americans. A ranger washing the thick dust off his face with a bottle of water, the sound of water splashing and the hum of a stadium generator. Wait until you see how this changed the world's view of peacekeeping. A map showing Mogadishu, then zooming out to show the entire world. Here's what nobody knew. This battle would end the era of nation building. The focus shifts from the tactical battle to the global impact. Archive footage of President Bill Clinton speaking at a White House podium, a somber, televised address from the Oval Office to the nation. That's 18 American lives lost. The public demand for answers begins. A close-up of a ranger's dog tags hanging on a memorial cross. The soft clinking of metal in the wind at a quiet base. The names of the 18 are scrolled on the screen in silence. Mike Durant in his cell, looking at a small, high window. The sound of a heavy wooden door locking from the outside. Imagine the uncertainty of being the only soldier left behind. Graphics showing the lessons learned for modern urban combat. Icons for advanced body armor, night vision, and heavy support. Here's why this matters today. Every modern operation uses these lessons. A modern ranger training in a simulated urban environment. The beep 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 of a training timer marks the start. The Mogadishu Mile is now a standard, required training event. Archive footage of the Rangers returning home to Fort Benning. Families crying and hugging their soldiers on the airport tarmac. Notice what happens next. The silence of the men who were there. A slow pan across the 18 stars on a unit memorial wall. A single trumpet playing taps echoes in the distance. Randy Shughart and Gary Gordon. Names that will live forever. A map of the current city of Mogadishu transformed yet still scarred. The sounds of a busy, modern Somali market fill the audio. That's 30 years later. The city still remembers the day of the Rangers. A veteran of the battle sitting in a chair, looking at the camera. The creak of the chair and a long, thoughtful, heavy exhale. Here's what nobody knew. We would do it all again for each other. A Black Hawk flying into the sunset, silhouetted against the sky. This is where it gets really interesting. The story isn't about defeat. The focus returns to the core theme of resilience and survival. Close-up of a ranger's shoulder patch. Rangers lead the way. The sound of a crisp, professional military salute. That's 100% effort. 0% surrender. That is the standard. A split screen showing 1993 combat gear versus modern 2024 gear. Side-by-side comparison of communication and ballistic protection. Technical accuracy. From iron sights to advanced red dot optics. A hand placing a challenge coin on a grave at Arlington. The soft clink of metal on the white headstone. Here's why this matters today. Freedom has a price, and they paid it. A Black Hawk, hovering over a modern-day training range. The powerful roar of the engine's clean, loud, and reliable. Notice what happens next. The next generation prepares for their turn. A soldier's boots hitting the ground in slow motion. A final, heavy thud that signifies the end of the run. That's one story finished. 1,000 more are being written. The Olympic Hotel, now a ruin under a bright blue sky. The wind blowing through the empty, bullet-scarred window frames. Here's what nobody knew. The ghosts of that day still guard these streets. A ranger instructor pointing to a map during a recruit briefing. Listen up, because what happened in '93 can happen tomorrow. That's 3 decades of knowledge, passed down in a single lesson. Archive clip of a Black Hawk taking off from a carrier deck. The spray of the ocean as the wheels lift off into the air. Wait until you see how this shaped modern American foreign policy. A close-up of a Super 6-to-1 Task Force Ranger Challenge coin. The coin spinning on a wooden table, then coming to a stop. In exactly 60 seconds, we conclude the greatest tactical story told. The screen goes black with a single white line of text. Here's why this matters. Courage is the only thing that never fails. The final focus is on the moral victory of the soldiers. A montage of the 18 heroes' photos appearing one by one. Soft, respectful, orchestral music builds to a crescendo. Each Name a story, each story a lesson in absolute bravery. A modern ranger standing at attention during a sunset ceremony. The rustle of a flag in the wind is the only sound heard. They are the keepers of the flame that was lit in Mogadishu. A Black Hawk flying over the Pentagon at dusk. The low, steady, familiar beat of the rotors overhead. Notice what happens next. The world watches as we never forget. A veteran looking at his old, dusty uniform in a closet. The sound of a zipper closing on a piece of personal history. They walk among us, carrying the memories of that longest day. A fast motion sunset over the modern city of Mogadishu. The city noise rising, then falling into a peaceful night. That's 30 years of peace in some streets, and 30 years of memory. A close-up of the blue medal of honor ribbon. A swell of triumphant, yet somber music fills the scene. Mogadishu. Gary Gordon. Names that live in history forever. A group of young soldiers running in formation during sunrise. The rhythmic chant of a military cadence keeps the pace. Rangers lead the way. Always have, always will. A wide-angle shot of the Earth from space, focusing on Africa. A deep, resonant hum, like the vibration of the Earth itself. One small point on the map, with one massive impact on the soul. A final shot of a Black Hawk tail rotor spinning in the sun. The sound of the wind, then a sudden, clean, final silence. We remember them not for how they fell, but for how they stood. The channel logo appears over a background of the Mogadishu skyline. If you want more stories of tactical innovation, hit subscribe. Next week, the SAS raid that defied gravity. See you then.